There is a moment. You know it the second it happens. A person you like, a person who has done nothing wrong, says something completely ordinary, and something in you recoils. Not anger. Something quieter and worse. A kind of allergic exhaustion. You smile. You nod. But inside, a door slams shut. And afterward, alone in your car or lying in bed replaying the day, a thought arrives that frightens you a little. I think I might hate people now. Not one person. Not a villain, not an enemy. People. The species. The noise of them. You did not used to be like this. You used to answer the phone. You used to say yes to dinner. Now every group chat feels like a small tax. Every quick call feels like a theft. Here is the harsh truth the ancient Stoics understood, and modern psychology is only now catching up to. This feeling is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you have become bitter or broken or cold. It is data. It is your mind doing exactly what it was designed to do, after being asked to do too much of something it was never built to do endlessly. Perform, absorb, and adapt to other human beings without pause. 2,000 years ago, a man wrote a letter to his friend about this exact sensation. The way a crowd can enter you and leave you a worse version of yourself. He did not call it burnout. He did not have that word. But he named the mechanism precisely, and the warning he gave has outlived every empire that came after him. Today we go back to that letter. We go back to the man who felt what you are feeling 20 centuries before you were born, and we find out what he did about it. This is the Stoic Guide to Social Burnout, and it starts, as it should, with a man walking away from a crowd. Let us begin. The year is roughly 64 AD. Seneca, statesman, playwright, and former advisor to the Emperor Nero, is an older man now, weary of Roman politics and increasingly withdrawn from public life. He is writing a long series of letters to his younger friend Lucilius, a Roman official stationed in Sicily. These letters were later gathered as the Moral Letters to Lucilius. They are one of the richest surviving records of Stoic thought we have, because unlike a philosophical treatise, they are deeply personal. They show a mind thinking in real time, working through real irritations. In the 7th letter of that collection, Seneca opens with a question Lucilius had asked him. Should a wise man mix with the crowd? Should he go out, be seen, and take part in the great public life of Rome? Seneca's answer begins with a memory. He tells Lucilius about coming home once from the midday spectacles at the arena. Not the famous morning combats between trained gladiators, skilled men who had chosen a craft, however brutal. The midday games were different, cruder. Between the scheduled main events, the crowd was fed a lesser spectacle. Condemned men with no training and no armor, thrown together simply to kill or be killed, for the amusement of a break in the schedule. Seneca describes it in essence as slaughter with no skill in it at all. Pure violence offered up as filler. And here is the detail that matters most for us. Seneca does not dwell on the violence itself. He dwells on what happened to him, to his own character, simply from sitting in that crowd and absorbing its energy for a few hours. He describes going in a reasonably steady, humane, gentle-tempered man, and coming out changed, more cruel, more inhuman than when he arrived. He had not fought anyone. He had not lifted a hand. He had simply sat and watched and let the mood of 10,000 strangers pour into him, and it left a residue he could feel for hours afterward. This is the turning point of the letter, and it is worth sitting with. Seneca, a man trained for decades in reason, in self-command, and in the discipline of not being ruled by passing emotion, still felt himself pulled downward by the sheer proximity of a crowd's mood. He does not excuse himself from this. He does not pretend his training made him immune. He names it directly. Nothing is as dangerous to good character, he warns Lucilius, as loitering around at some public spectacle. Because that is precisely when vice creeps in more easily, through the avenue of pleasure. Seneca goes further. He describes a mechanism almost 2,000 years before neuroscience would give it a name. He says that even one companion of bad temper, one person given to complaint or vice, can corrupt you a little just by contact. The way a single sick body in close quarters can pass illness to a healthy one, even without visible symptoms yet. Multiply that by a crowd, he argues, and the effect multiplies with it. You cannot bathe in a mood that large and come out completely dry. So what did Seneca actually recommend? Not hatred of humanity, not total withdrawal from the world. He was explicit that some contact with others, chosen carefully, is necessary and good for a person. A completely solitary life was not his prescription. His instruction to Lucilius was narrower and more disciplined than that. Withdraw from the crowd specifically. The anonymous, ownerless mass of people whose mood you absorb, but whose character you never actually get to know. Choose, instead, a small number of people worth being close to. Spend your energy where it can actually be returned to you, in real relationship. Not spilled outward into a mass of strangers who will forget you the moment you leave the stands. He goes home that day in the letter, not energized by the spectacle, but depleted by it. And he names the depletion honestly, without shame, to a friend he trusts. That honesty is the part almost no one talks about. The most disciplined Stoic mind we have record of did not pretend to be unaffected by other people. He simply refused to stay in the room that was draining him, and he was precise about naming why. Consider, for a moment, what that walk home would have actually felt like. Rome in the middle of the 1st century was not a quiet place. Even away from the arena, the streets themselves were a kind of low, constant crowd. Merchants calling out prices. The clatter of cart wheels on stone. The press of bodies through narrow alleys that never fully emptied day or night. There was no true silence available to a man like Seneca, not the way we imagine solitude today. His retreat was not into emptiness. It was into a smaller, chosen noise. His own household. His own study. The particular quiet of a room with a single lamp and a scroll, rather than the undifferentiated roar of 10,000 strangers. This distinction matters more than it first appears. Seneca was not seeking the absence of all people. He was seeking the presence of the right few, in a space small enough that he could still recognize himself inside it. A crowd erases the edges of a person. You stop being an individual reacting to what you see, and start becoming a current in something larger, carried along by a momentum that is not entirely your own. Seneca's letter is a record of him noticing that erasure happening to him in real time, and refusing to let it finish. By the time he reaches his writing table that evening, the letter tells us, something has already shifted back into place. He is not describing a man still shaken. He is describing a man who has processed the exposure, named it precisely to a friend who will understand, and in the naming, already begun to metabolize it. The antidote to a corrosive crowd was never suppression or denial. It was articulation. Seneca did not pretend the afternoon had not affected him. He wrote it down in detail to someone he trusted, and in doing so, turned a passive experience of contagion into an active act of understanding. Here is what almost every modern explanation of social burnout misses, and what Seneca understood without a single brain scan. The exhaustion is not really about the people themselves. It is about unfiltered exposure to mood. Other people's moods, entering you without your permission, faster than your reasoning mind can screen them out. Modern psychology has a term adjacent to this: emotional contagion. Studies on it show something remarkably close to what Seneca described by instinct. Moods spread between people who are simply in proximity, below the level of conscious awareness. Through tone of voice, posture, facial expression, and the sheer density of unspoken signals a group produces. You do not have to be told a room is anxious to become anxious in it. Your nervous system reads the room before your mind finishes the sentence. I am fine. Now stack that on top of a life that has made proximity to other people nearly infinite. Seneca had to physically walk to the arena to be flooded by a crowd's mood, and physically walk home to leave it. You carry the arena in your pocket. Every notification is a tiny midday spectacle. Someone else's outrage. Someone else's grief. Someone else's demand. Delivered directly into your nervous system with no walk home required. No transition. No threshold you have to cross to leave it behind. This is why the hatred you feel is not really hatred of people. It is your mind's blunt, exhausted shorthand for something more precise. I have absorbed more unfiltered human mood than I have the capacity to process, and I have no clear boundary left between what is mine and what belongs to someone else. Psychologists sometimes describe this using the idea of a social battery, a finite capacity for interaction that depletes with use. But Seneca's version is more useful because it is not just about energy. It is about character. He was not only worried about being tired after the games. He was worried about coming home a worse version of himself. More cruel. More cynical. More inhuman, in his own words, because he had let too much of someone else's mood in without a filter. That is the real danger of chronic social overexposure. It is not simply fatigue. It is drift. Small, repeated, unnoticed shifts in who you are. Your patience thinning. Your default assumption about strangers curdling towards suspicion. Your capacity for warmth quietly rationed down because you have been marinating in other people's unprocessed emotion without ever choosing to. The Stoics believed character was built the same way water carves stone. Not through one dramatic event, but through repeated, small exposure. What you sit in, you become. Seneca sat in a crowd for an afternoon and felt it corrode him a little. What happens to a mind that sits in a much larger, much louder crowd, the entire internet for hours, every single day for years? The lesson is not that other people are the enemy. Isolation was never his cure. The lesson is that unfiltered, undiscerning exposure is the enemy. Hating people, in the end, is often just the mind's crude alarm bell for a much more precise problem. You have stopped choosing who gets access to your inner state, and your inner state is now being written by strangers. Step 1. Practice what Seneca actually did, not what he is remembered for. He did not preach total withdrawal from humanity. He practiced selective withdrawal from the crowd, specifically. Translate this literally into your week. Take an honest inventory of every source of unfiltered crowd mood in your life. Group chats with more than 5 people. Social feeds you scroll passively. Comment sections. The news cycle consumed in short, constant bursts throughout the day. These are your modern amphitheater. You do not owe them your presence. Pick 2 or 3 of the loudest ones and simply leave the stands. Mute the group chat for a week. Delete one app from your home screen. Set a hard stop time after which you consume no more feeds that day. Notice, honestly, whether you come out the other side calmer. Most people are shocked at how quickly the answer becomes obvious once they actually try it instead of just wondering about it. Step 2. Build what we might call a threshold ritual. A deliberate, physical transition between the crowd and yourself. Seneca had one built into his life by necessity, and you probably do not. He had a walk home. A door he closed. A change from public robes into the clothes of private life. Modern life has erased almost all of these thresholds. You can go from a stressful video call to scrolling outrage to a family dinner in the space of 90 seconds, with your nervous system never once given a signal that says, "The exposure has ended, you may stand down now." Build one deliberately. It does not need to be elaborate. 5 minutes of silence with your phone in another room after any high-stimulation interaction. A short walk with no audio input at all. Even the simple physical act of changing your shirt or washing your hands as a symbolic close of one mode and opening of another. The ritual itself matters less than the fact that it exists and that you actually observe it every time without skipping it when you are too busy. Because that is precisely when you need it most. Step 3. Apply the circle of concern filter, adapted directly from the Stoic distinction between what is in your control and what is not. Before absorbing any group's mood, a comment section, a group chat, a family gathering, or a news segment, ask one honest question. Does this group know me, and can this relationship give anything back to me? If the answer is no, you are not obligated to let their mood become your mood. You can witness a crowd's noise without drinking it. Practically, this means training a small pause between stimulus and absorption. Noticing the outrage, the grievance, or the demand and consciously labeling it. This is their mood, not mine, and I am allowed to set it back down. This single habit, practiced daily, is closer to what Seneca meant by Stoic discipline than any amount of willpower. It is not suppression. It is discernment. Step 4. Reinvest deliberately in the handful of relationships that give something back. Seneca's answer to withdrawing from the crowd was never isolation. It was concentration. He kept Lucilius. He kept a small circle of correspondence he trusted enough to admit, in writing, that a crowd had made him feel less humane for an afternoon. That kind of honesty only survives in relationships with real depth, not in a feed of 1,000 acquaintances. Practically, choose 2 or 3 people this week and give them the attention you have been leaking out to everyone else. A real conversation, undistracted, phone away, with no audience and no performance. Ask them something you actually want to know the answer to. This is not a minor addition to the other 3 steps. It is the entire point of them. You do not withdraw from the crowd in order to be alone. You withdraw from the crowd in order to have something left over for the people who actually deserve it. Notice, too, the order in which Seneca does this. He does not reinvest in close relationships as compensation for withdrawing from the crowd, as if it were a consolation prize. He treats it as the actual goal, the thing the withdrawal was always in service of. A useful test, when you feel the urge to disappear from everyone entirely after a draining stretch of social exposure, is to ask whether you are seeking rest or seeking isolation. Because they are not the same thing, and only one of them was part of Seneca's practice. Rest restores your capacity to be present with the people worth being present for. Isolation, extended too long, simply trades one kind of depletion for another. The quiet ache of a mind with no one left to test its thoughts against, no Lucilius to write to. The goal was never an empty room. It was a room with the right person in it, and the strength left over to actually be there with them. Taken together, these 4 steps are not a rejection of people. They are a rejection of the undifferentiated crowd. The modern equivalent of Seneca's arena, running 24 hours a day, with no walk home built into it unless you build one yourself. Practiced consistently, even for a single week, most people find the hatred softening into something closer to what it actually was underneath. Tiredness, not disgust. And tiredness, unlike disgust, actually responds to rest. You do not hate people. You are exhausted by exposure without a threshold, mood without a filter, closeness without any real return. And your mind, in its blunt and honest way, gave that exhaustion the nearest word it had. Seneca felt the same pull in a smaller, slower world with none of the noise you carry in your pocket. And even he had to walk deliberately away from the crowd to protect the man he was trying to become. That walk is not cynicism. It is not coldness. It is the oldest form of self-respect there is, the refusal to let your character be written by strangers who will never know your name. So take the walk. Close the door. Choose the few and give them what the many were never going to deserve. That is not hatred. That is discernment. And discernment, practiced daily, is how a tired mind slowly becomes a peaceful one again. Seneca did not have the language of burnout or social batteries or emotional contagion. He had a scroll, a lamp, and a friend far away in Sicily patient enough to receive his honesty. What he built with those simple tools has outlasted the empire around him by 2,000 years. Not because he found a way to stop feeling the pull of the crowd, but because he found a disciplined, repeatable way to walk back from it every single time without losing the man he was trying to become. That is the real inheritance here. Not the absence of exhaustion. The refusal to let exhaustion decide who you are. If this changed the way you think about the people around you, and the crowd you did not choose to let in, subscribe. Every week, we go back to the ones who faced this before us, and bring their answers forward into a world they never could have imagined but somehow still understood. Until the next one, stay steady, stay sharp, and never hand your peace to anyone but yourself.